This is a Niche Radio podcast. Subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or log into www.nicheradio.co.za.
Welcome to SuperDads. I'm your host, James Lech from jameslech.co.za. And today we have a very special guest with us. He's actually a fellow SuperDad because, like me, he's got a consulting service. He's got a podcast series, and he is a father himself and a husband and a family man, protector of the environment in terms of what we're going to be discussing. His name is Gary Kirwan, and he is a co-founder of Biohackers Lab, a website and health podcast that explores the world of biohacking, and citizen scientist experiments people are doing to help improve their health or the health of their family. He has a degree in chiropractic and has a keen interest in many health fields ranging from pain management to nutritional health. And what you recognize from his accent is that even though he's overseas, he is South African as well in terms of his many years here. Gary, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, James.
So kind of an interesting thing, we actually incorporating the whole blue blocking glasses today. So Gary's got his on and I've got mine on. And we're going to discuss a bit of that because obviously he's going to share with us his words of wisdom in many years from the type of hacks and adjustments he's made to protect himself as a man, and along with his family and his many customers and clients and followers out there. So Gary, tell us a bit more sort of your background, sort of what got you into this realm of biohacking. Normally it comes from one's own personal health failure. There'll be like that extreme tipping point, be it them personally or a loved one. And then they would just go down this addictive quest to find out what's going on. And, like all of us, we make real F-ups along the way and we learn from it and we adapt and we get there. But you're quite the veteran at this. So yeah, tell us about sort of what got you into it.
Sure. So my journey started from a biohacking point of view. I learned more about this field in 2012. And back in 2012, I was following a lady called Laurie Draper, and she's big in the fitness world because being a chiropractor, I was following a whole bunch of different people just to keep up to date with things. And she tweeted about this thing called bulletproof coffee. And I was like, what is this? I mean, I like coffee, but what is this thing called bulletproof coffee? And so, of course, I went down that rabbit hole and I'm like, you put butter in your coffee? Like, why would you put butter in your coffee? And it just got me fascinated. And of course, so I was like, okay, I don't know, it's wacky, but I'm going to give it a try. Like, I've just got to try this thing. And I was listening to Dave Asprey's podcast, and which I think had just started then, or there was only a few episodes out. And I quite liked some of the things he was talking about. So I thought, no, I'll give it a go. My daughter had just been born at the end of 2011, and I thought, yeah, why not? Let's just see, see what happens from it. And I did that experiment. So I decided to do this like bulletproof coffee diet experiment and this high fat experiment just to see what happened. That was super fascinating for me because 8 months later, my goal wasn't to lose weight, but I lost 17 kilograms in weight. So I went from about 94 kilos down to 79, I think was my lowest. And I'm about 6'3" in height. So I haven't been 79 kilos since teenage years somewhere. But I actually got too low for my weight, and I changed things around then. But it taught me a lesson, like, okay, there's something to this, about this high fat. And also whilst I was in that high fat realm, of course, being drummed into me over the years, like, no, you're going to die if you have butter because it's going to clog up your arteries, and, saturated fat is the devil. But when I did so much research around that time and cardiovascular markers, and then, I could go into that, where I ended up down at Rosebank, and I was doing scans of my heart, and I went to the UK and it scans my arteries and my neck, and just to check all these markers, and I was doing blood tests and things, and it just opened up that whole world of N=1 experimentation. How do you quantify certain parameters? What's worth it? So it all really started back then in 2012 for me.
So when did you leave? When did you start your chiropractic business and then move back overseas?
So I graduated 2004 from the UK, a place called AECC, and I worked for a little bit here in the UK first, and then I went back to Johannesburg and I was practicing in a place called Four Ways. So I had my own clinic there for about 10 years. And I've always been interested in different modalities, so people just think of a chiropractor just for neck and back pain, which is, the primary thing that people come and see a chiropractor for. But so many times other things will crop up in the conversation when you're speaking with a patient. They'll tell you they're on either different diets, taking supplements, they've got certain health conditions, psychological stresses. There's a whole realm of things. And it's, what we call sort of like the holistic picture, which is what is happening with people. So of course, I can't help with everything. I can only deal with certain things, but I could also recognize that certain elements would all link into each other. So a good example for you would be psychology. A classic example would be, say I have someone, they came in with raging arm pain from a trapped nerve or a pinched nerve in their neck. So like maybe a disc, it looks like a disc in their neck is herniated or bulged out, and they're getting neurological symptoms down their arm. But when I do the health history with them, I find out that they're dealing with the stress of having like a father who's just died in the last month. And so they had no symptoms, no issues until in the last month, they've had all this grief. And so for me there, it's like, okay, look, you've got a physical ailment, but we're dealing with a psychological stress here too, which is compounding the pain syndrome. So we've got to sort of two-prong attack this to get from a pain management point of view. So I've always looked at multifaceted approaches to trying to deal with a situation. And I'm a great believer in options. So I kind of think if I was the patient, I would like the healthcare practitioner I'm consulting with to sort of give me options. And that's what I believe is informed consent. So they could go, all right, okay, if I was in your situation, I would look at A, B, and C. And here's the risk, here's the benefits, and sort of you got to use that graph to say high risk, low benefit, or high benefit, low risk, or what's going on here, and you can make your own decision which direction you want to go. So yeah, that's so I've always been in that side of things, but I just sort of I publicize it more now, my kind of thoughts and the people that I follow. So hopefully that answers the question. I lost track there, but
no, I mean it's helpful, and I'm going to come back to different parts back and forth. So let's go back to one of the earlier things you were mentioning about, and then we're going to come back to the emotional stuff that you mentioned just now. You mentioned like the whole bulletproof coffee. So for our listeners out there, essentially it's why have your coffee and just put butter in. And me, I actually enjoy the whole thing of having a very nice thick creaminess in it. So I enjoyed having the butter in it, particularly. I don't know if you remember the Irene Dairy Farm in Pretoria.
I've been there.
Yeah. So I mean, I go up to Gauteng periodically, but the thing I always miss the most, and I actually take back with me on the plane, is liters of milk from there, because it's from the grass-fed cows and it's fresh. It has the highest DHA content. And there's sort of this warmthness that comes from it and this enjoyment. So having sort of the milk from there or the butter has much more spurge of like this relief than just normal, milk you buy in the shop. And the whole bulletproof coffee, it's great. The only downside is, with especially this non-native EMF environments, that and this includes blue light, is that it lowers our oxygen carrying potential. And with having coffee, it's going to sort of help dehydrate the cells even further. So, how again affects the mitochondria. And a key thing also came up is one of your recent guests was sort of like the salt doctor. He had a great book called Salt. I can't remember his name. It's off the top of my head now.
Dr. James Dean Nicola Antonio. Yeah,
Dr. Nicola Antonio. I mean, that was a great interview that you had with him. And it was interesting how he says you actually need that additional salt supplementation. And I found, with the coffee, because you're leaching a lot more salt quickly, you have to supplement it. Otherwise, you have this sort of crash effect. But as we learned in that interview, no salt's the same. And, what actually I found works really well is to have seaweed, to consume seaweed or make like a seaweed smoothie shot. Because from that, not only getting the salt, but you're also getting the iodine that's vitally important. And you mentioned earlier about the whole having the butter and the fat and this whole cholesterol issue. But the key thing with the iodine is that when it's in the brain, it helps the brain process the HDL cholesterol. So it's very important for offsetting that issue with the fats in that. But again, also the thing with the butter in that is that if it's winter period, grass-fed butters is best. But in summer, it's better to rather switch over to something like coconut oil in sort of that processing and working with the photons in the sun. I don't know if you found that kind of effect as well, the differences, or if you explored that further.
Not with sort of looking at the seasonality with the coconut oil or coconut and butter, but I did look at even the seasonality of butter itself. So butter, the nutritional content of butter has to naturally fluctuate with the seasons, because a lot of farmers will bring their milking cows into the shed and then top them up with something, or so it's very hard sometimes to actually just get true what's called grass-fed butter. But I have played around with different fats too, and at the stage I'm at now, I actually don't drink bulletproof coffee every day. I found also that you can have too much too much fat in your coffee sometimes, and maybe it gives you a different reaction too. And I'm actually just right now this week I'm testing what it's like to not have any coffee. So I've decided to go, I mean, I love my coffee normally, but I just want to see the different, some different physiological reactions in me. Like if I don't stimulate myself with any caffeine at all, what that does to myself. So I think it's always good to play around. And I like the idea of seasonality. I do think that's a big element in health that we miss out. When you live at different latitudes or different countries, the light is, with the photons, is massively important. And also, as you mentioned, with the non-native EMFs, I mean, the kind of environment you live in makes a big difference. And I always try to think of that where I think an extreme example might be someone who's living in an apartment in San Francisco or in New York, and they're just inundated with stupendous amounts of non-native EMFs, of Wi-Fi's and Bluetooth, and who knows what else is beaming all around them, compared to someone who's living out in the sticks somewhere, on a farm or a plot or something. It's a completely different environment too. So your nutritional status, I think it's a good thing to take that into account sometimes, but I've never actually tried to figure out like how do you quantify that, or how do you maybe test to see, even subjectively, how you feel.
Well, in terms of, I mean, we'd look at the redox potential of one cell. So the one way is, I mean, you could have your DNA taken out and sent to the lab by Doug Wallace, and check what the spin rate is of your mitochondria. So that's the one way of doing it. The other way, what you'll find is also, I mean, like you said, there's the Wi-Fi and cell phones, and everyone's more concerned about that. But again, they all fall into light, and light has a magnetic field and an electric field. And people often overlooked, again, we're having blue light glasses on us. And yes, we try to protect our retina and the loss of DHA through that process. But also people think, oh, I've got the glasses on, but now my skin isn't covered. So, I mean, you probably found with your residency and learning with chiropractics in the beginning that you had, I assume, the fluorescent lights up in your office or your workplace, and you were, burning yourself quite heavily with the fluorescent lights and that toxic blue light effect. So even if you had the glasses on, you would still be getting this negative effect from the opposite. And that's also why many people, crave the whole thing of the bulletproof fad, or the kombucha fad, or the sauerkraut, because the kombucha and that they're craving the salts, from it. And with the coffee, it gives you that pick-me-up because it helps, shortcut or biohack the central nervous system to keep on going in pain management. However, as we found with the salt episode, the accelerated leaching of salt then starts having all these other, accelerations of calcium efflux. And then, one just has this dropping effect. So what I found, and also there's the whole constipation issue as well. So what I found out, I mean, maybe you can try it if you go to the beach sometime, harvest some seaweed and, make that into a little shot for yourself and having that morning and evening. And I found doing that personally, no constipation issues, nice and regular, and no craving for coffee either. So I come to a thing of where I would have coffee once a week, and that would be on the weekend where I would teach cold thermogenesis, and it's more of a comfort social thing. But I found I don't actually have to have it because I have more productive energy from from having the seaweed to build up those levels. But that's only because of my intolerance to non-native EMF. My body's more subjective to losing salt. The same for persons with cystic fibrosis or other autoimmune diseases. So what you'll probably find is, if you try some of that adjustment to your coffee regimen, you'll be able to get along with it much quicker and easier.
So I'm just interested with the seaweed. You take that, you get seaweed from the sea.
Yeah.
And I like from a food hygiene or anything, are there any concerns regarding that?
All right, so this is where a lot of the complexities have come for persons thinking, if you take food from the sea or fish or this whole mercury thing, a lot of it comes down to sort of a over scare issue, because it's deviating from what the N=1 issue is. Your focus is to have a good redox. Now, if you have a poor redox, you're going to have an accumulation then of metals in the cells. So a body with a good redox is naturally going to flush out the things. So even if you take a person who has a severe problem with mold or multiple chemical sensitivity, they have a very poor redox potential. And this you can check with the labs, you can check and monitor and see how they are. But the moment you then take the protocol to improve on their redox, their tolerance or issue with the chemical sensitivity disappears. They can walk into a house full of mold and they won't be affected by it. So that's part of it. When you're having, so if you're eating seafood, now you don't have to have the seaweed if you're having a high seafood diet, because the seafood already has the high iodine levels and salt that your body would need. But if you're not having as much seafood, then you'll supplement with the seaweed. But again, having that seaweed helps improve your redox potential, but it's a non-linear relationship. So if you're just having the seaweed and not having your photons from the sun as well, then it's not going to work. Particularly you being up at your latitude and with the weather, you have to purposely have more of a ketogenic diet, and especially with a non-native EMF, because your mitochondria is missing that first step where it works with the oxygen. So that's why this whole diet fan to ketogenic has become so popular in the last few years, is because it's the biohack to bypass this non-native EMF hindrance. So going into phase 2, the mitochondria, where it works on getting the electrons from the fats foods, it's the most efficient. That's where it's able to overcome this issue with the environment. But if you don't, if you're having the sun every day and you're having this oxygen potential, because the sun gives you the UV to enable that, then you don't have to worry about fats. You can have a carbohydrate diet. You can even be vegan, vegetarian with no problem. But the higher you go away from the equator and the more your non-native environment is hammering you, you are forced to go into a fish type of ketogenic diet. So most people with the paleospheres, most guys are usually going, okay, we're having bacon, we're having beef. And yes, if you're having grass-fed animals or free range, you're going to have a higher DHA content, but it's still very, very slow or very little. But if you're having a seafood, so particularly shellfish, so mussels, oysters are very great because you can have them raw, it's higher content. Shrimp, those would have a higher DHA content. And with having being by colder oceans, the colder the ocean is, the higher the DHA content is found in the fish. So again, we're not focusing, it's not about diet here. You're not looking at calories. You're looking at electron and photon diet. That's actually what your diet is. That's only counting you're doing. And with that, you'll find, especially if in your realm, if you're in the high latitude, you're an uncoupled haplotype. So you have to engage in cold thermogenesis in order to shrink down your respiratory proteins to improve your redox potential. And with that, you'll find that you're losing the weight in terms of fat, but you're going to be building muscle. So with me, when I had my stroke at the beginning of the year, it was quite a turnaround. It was a shit experience, but it was quite a blessing because it drastically shifted my research and going heavy into getting myself active again. And yeah, I lost 16 kilos and didn't do any exercise. In the same process, I got a 4-pack, 6-pack. Yes, I lost weight, but I actually retained and built muscle in different parts, and without having any exercise, which is great. And we see this in nature with polar bears. They don't do exercise, they have this high-fat diet, but they're doing intermittent fasting so the body can work. So what you probably find is with, you having to have coffee so often, is that you're struggling to have a more balanced ketogenic diet where you're actually having a meal, trying to go once a day. And, the more toxic your environment is, the more you want to have that fasting break, because that way your respiratory proteins can shrink and work better. Your liver has a chance to actually do its process with the enzymes. This is kind of why women have morning sickness. So the morning sickness is a sort of defense or redox mechanism of the fetus inside the womb. And this happens quite heavily with, with mothers that are exposed to blue light or the non-native EMF environments, because when there's a missignaling and the respiratory proteins in the child mitochondria is stretching out further, then the child sends a light signal to the mother that forces them to feel nauseous and sick. And that fasting mechanism, by starving the mother and the child, shrinks the respiratory proteins to make them work more efficiently. But what we find is with mothers that are quite toxic or badly affected, they're having morning sickness, for the entire 9-month period. And it's right to the very end. And also, the whole point of strengthening respiratory proteins, we understand that the water coming out of the tap is different to the water coming out of the mitochondria. The water comes out of mitochondria is deuterium depleted. And, when your child is constantly being stressed, those respiratory proteins, they're not able to deplete the deuterium within the cell. And then that's what's resulting in them for their heads to get bigger, their bodies get bigger, and, therefore increasing this risk of a C-section, because the child can no longer fit through the undercarriage of the mother. So this whole, non-linear relationship gets quite big, but it's understanding that, going from one thing to another. I know it doesn't work necessarily with me saying with your side because you sell supplements, but when I, consult with clients or doctors, the first thing I always advocate is to not have any supplements at all, because you want to focus on building up the redox. Once the redox is more efficient, then you can add a supplement to really rocket it forward. But what we find in looking at blood work and labs with persons is that if they have a poor redox potential and the environment is still crap, the supplements have no effect on their blood work whatsoever. It's just flushing it down. So, I mean, yeah, like we said, we've got the blue blocking glasses, very helpful, very effective in helping remove that risk of destroying the melatonin in the brain and a DHA, just so they can have that recovery process and that, homeostasis for them. But, that's just one of the elements. But like you said, people think they're just going to have the glasses and they're protected. And they'll just still have the Wi-Fi going on. They'll have the lights going crazy, disco party, but none of that really works per se. So it is a process and it is a learning thing. But I found, when it comes to tackling non-native EMF, the glasses is the quickest, easiest thing, because we want to focus on raising the person's dopamine levels. Because once dopamine levels are raised, then they're able to think laterally and go, okay, I understand now, I know what I'm doing. And that's kind of happened, what I understand happened to you with your process, is that you start implementing these different changes to raise your dopamine levels. And when your dopamine levels were higher, you were starting on fire, you could figure out ideas, you had saw the connections. But when you encounter scenarios where your dopamine levels dropped, then, your brain got a bit slower, things were getting more frustrating, that some things seemed too difficult. So yeah, it is a process, and it's more harder by you because you have less sunlight than we do back in Joburg. Because back in Joburg, yes, particularly Rosebank, it's got horrible non-native EMF. It's one of the worst parts in parts of Joburg in many instances. But being at the closer to the equator and the higher latitude, you had a lot more UV exposure. So in that regard, if you're out in the sun, you would have been better adaptive to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that is the one thing I'm so aware of having moved north, is just the UV content, the lack of sunlight, and how privileged it is to live in South Africa. But you don't even have to think of that as an element. Think, oh, how am I going to get enough sun? You can, it's just there. So especially in Johannesburg, I miss the Johannesburg winters too, where it's just so sunny.
But don't you have those infrared sunbeds in the UK?
Yes, yeah, there are infrared sunbeds. I haven't I haven't used any. And I've got a red light machine, like a photo biomodulation machine that I used at clinic. I use it on myself at home, but I would love to be able to lay in one of the full sunbeds too, just for general boost effect. That would be a great thing to get access to.
Yeah, typically what works well. I mean, part of what my research was, my master's section was modeling the potential effects non-native EMF has on the population. And then with doing that baseline, it's about simulating different mitigation options. So what a community could do, because you at what latitude are you? You're in what, 40 something? Close to 50?
I've never looked at what latitude I'm at.
So, for those kind of latitudes, what works well, so if you have a practice, or it could be a church and whatnot, the infrared sunbeds, you got the lying down ones, you got the standing up ones as well. I mean, they're close to about $40,000, but it works quite well for community areas like you. And what happens in the morning, people would just come in for their brief session, even if it's 10 minutes. And that's enough to trigger the supplementation during the cloudy and winter periods. So that works quite well as a business community model to offset those effects. But even if it's cloudy, it's still important to get out in the sun, because even if it's cloudy at your latitude, you're still going to get about 31% sunlight coming through. And that's still enough to supplement you through the process. Because if you're not going to be out in that morning sun, exposing your skin as much as possible, particularly naked. Also know in your neck of the woods, the company that makes UV-free sunbathers. So you can have your genitalia and breasts exposed as well. And because if you're not going to get that morning infrared sun exposed on that, even if it's just, minimum 3 minutes is needed, your melatonin production isn't going to get kickstarted, and your circadian biology isn't going to be ready in the evening. So everyone thinks, melatonin production starts at night. It's not. It starts in the morning, and at nighttime, it gets triggered with the release. But what we found in non-native EMF, when you're having that cycle starting, you're having the blue lights or the Wi-Fi and such like hitting you at nighttime, then that kills that melatonin. And that's why people aren't able to sleep, cortisol goes crazy, and all those other different facets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, the circadian biology is a big element I've always tried to tell people about too. It's kind of, even with the biohacking world, it's cool that you've got all these gizmos and gadgets and supplements and yada yadas, but you got to get the basics right. And that's exactly what you said earlier too. From the supplementation point of view, it's like you at the biggest return of investment is if you can get your basics right, like what you're eating, because that's the biggest chemical you're probably putting into your body every day on a continuous basis. And then your sleep, and if you can modify some of your environmental factors, and even then getting into the socializing and the psychology element things of too. It's like those. I always try to think, when I talk to people and they mention some weird or wonderful gizmos that might cost, like a whole house mortgage or something. It's kind of like maybe that's a nice to have for certain scenarios. And again, it's like those ABC situations. Like, yes, you could use it in this situation if you have access to it, or if you wanted to do something really fast. But I still look at people like in South Africa, and particularly in the informal settlement community, and some of those people are so healthy in a way, and you kind of like, so they have nothing, but they're healthier than people who maybe have everything in one sense. It's like, so what are they doing right that we're not doing right in one sense? And I always respected that, to think, no, that's what you want to do. You want to sort of just get the basics right, because you can see how powerful it is from that. And that's what life's about, is just to live a happy, healthy life. So
now, you mentioned a key word there, and that's the social factor. Socialization is one of the most important things in the entire list. Because, I mean, if you have energy vampires around you, even if it's in your own family, I mean, that's going to cripple you. I mean, you being married as well, you understand a fight with your wife is one of the worst things ever, because it's this constant stress burden that's on you the whole time. And if it lasts for days, it's even worse. It's worse than being mugged or having someone else at work trying gunning for you. So it's very important to have that key social relationship and nuance of it. Now, even the whole thing, like you mentioned with the equipment, I mean, my personal view is that the difference between a biohacker and a mito hacker is that a biohacker looks for the shortcut. It's just about like getting the tech, and I want flick a switch and I must feel better kind of thing. The idea of like having a coffee, you get that quick fix. Where a mito hacker understands there's a non-linear relationship and there's a process of it. So you need to yourself to be selfish and get yourself going right. So you have to focus on your social circle. You have to focus on what your practices are going to be. If you are going to have tech, how can it help you? Part of that, like you said, it costs the same as a mortgage. But part of my research as well, and that I consult with, is how to use certain government programs to actually subsidize or pay for the equipment for persons. So if they're disabled or if they work for government institution, they subsidize or they pay for their technology, these equipment technologies implemented in their work or office space. So be it, different lights or the glasses or those kind of things. So those are quite useful programs. I assume it might sort of be similar in the UK. I haven't studied your legislation on that, but I assume if it's possible here in South Africa, it's also possible there in the UK.
Yeah, I'm sure it must be. And I know if you've got certain conditions, for example, VAT is exempted on the products that you buy too. So there's a 20% saving on the product.
Wow, that's lucky. We got this horrible now new 15% VAT. And on top of that, you still have to pay another 20% if it's anything medical related or health related coming into the country.
Oh, wow, no. So in this case, yeah, I have seen in the UK that different medical devices, they'll state that it's VAT exempt, and there's a separate form that if you've had a condition diagnosed by your GP, then you can actually get a 20% discount off the price because you won't have to pay VAT.
And how's it going with the whole obesity and diabetes epidemic there in the UK? I mean, in South Africa now, it's upgraded to the second leading cause of death here for diabetes. And from our research and looking at previous research and Nobel Awards, non-native EMF is the leading. Again, like I say, non-native EMF includes blue light because part of the visible spectrum. Is the leading nonlinear contributor to obesity, diabetes, and other mitochondrial-related diseases.
Yeah, well, they've got the same problem over here from a rates point of view. So when I was practicing in the UK here, I mean, there's so many people when they get above 55, there's quite a few who start saying they're diabetic, so they went to the GP and now they're on metformin, or they have to watch things, or and there's a lot of uncontrolled diabetics too. So there would still be people who would come in and they say, no, I'm diabetic, type 2 diabetic, and I'm even now on insulin, but because it's gotten so bad, but like I've still got blood sugars in the morning of 10 millimolar, and it's just like, yeah, unfortunately, people haven't. I think a lot of people haven't got control of the glucose control, especially when they have been diagnosed, and I think it is because they're a little bit lost. So you get diagnosed. Here's your pills, or here's your medication. Off you go, and there's a little bit of support, and then of course there's the whole argument that the current guidelines are fueling. From a dietary point of view, it's contributing even more to causing or inflaming the diabetic situation, like the low carb community would say. So I find that interesting. But no, there's a lot of big people. Not as, I don't know. I've always tried it when I travel between the US and the UK. I try to compare, like, are there more big people in the UK or the more big people in the US? But it's also region based. So, for example, I would say in the north of England, you'll see a lot more bigger people compared to maybe even in the south of the UK. What reason? I don't know. There's a big economical difference between the south and the north of the UK too, which I believe makes a big difference. But yeah, so I would say that we've also got some increasing rates of obesity and diabetes in the UK.
Well, also remember you looking at it too much of a higher scale. So you mentioned there's that difference between the upper and the lower part. I mean, the UK is quite a long, elongated country versus wide. So you have quite a difference in sun exposure between the north and the south.
Oh yeah, big time.
So that's the one aspect of it. The second is, again, Now, when we look at, like, there's studies by Volkov and, you know, a number of others, when you're having a reduction in the oxygen potential from non-native EMFs, is that the brain then starts wanting to consume more glucose to try compensate for it. So that's why we're having this insulin change in the brain. And, you know, obesity is a disease of light, or lost light. Now, the same things with the diabetes, what we call it also in the brain, type 3 diabetes. So what happens with those persons is that with them being exposed to so much the blue light and the EMFs, is that it actually triggers this insulin change in their brain. So even though, you know, these paleo guys themselves, they, you know, have got this strict ketogenic diet, no sugar, no carbs, but they have a high non-native EMF exposure, and they're still having these insulin issues that are arising. So, I mean, for persons, like we found the protocols here, the quickest way for a diabetic to lose weight is to actually go walking on the beach by the water and having just their feet in the water and having as much clothes off as possible. Because with that process, one, they're getting the photons to help balance out the effects from the non-native EMF. Circadian rhythm gets more balance, but they are able to get the excess electrons from grounding, also called the inverse magnetic pull effect. So by doing that, they're supplementing the lost electrons that comes from a result of the covalent bonds being broken from non-native EMFs. So what happens is when, you know, those covalent bonds are broken, we're losing these electrons, we have excess of protons. You have this effect where the person then craves the carbs more so because one, they're looking for that sugary effect for the glucose, but two, they're going after foods with the least amount of electrons. So if they rather go for foods with a higher electron base, say for example the seafood, then that craving dissipates. But again, it's not going to work if you're not tackling the non-native EMF, because otherwise you're killing any DHA in the cells or melatonin. So again, comes back. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to just ask then. So, what do you think the difference is between, say, Johannesburg and Cape Town, then? Because so when you're up, you know, in land-based Johannesburg and there's no sea around you, do you think there's a difference in diabetic rates and obesity rates versus down in, say, the coastlines near Cape Town?
Well, the weird thing about Cape Town, I mean, I'll just give you a story. Because I do the cold thermogenesis, so I mean, the water here in winter gets to a nice below 10 degrees, which I love. And what happens is, you know, I'd be the only person in the ocean, and people would, you know, think I'm crazy, and they'd actually even called law enforcement to try pick me up, thinking I'm, you know, a crazy psycho dude. But my wife assures me, don't worry, I do have court documents that I am certified sane. But, you know, I think, you know, you think I'm crazy, but yet you're running on the beach with shoes on. You're fully covered in that. So, you know, these persons, they do go to the beach, but they're wearing sneakers. They're fully covered, they're fully clothed. So they're not going to get the grounding effect. They're not going to get those electrons to supplement the loss in the body. So what you'll probably find in the UK also, with it being more north, it's also darker. They tend to have the lights on more often. And it's not good light, it's a bad light. And then even if they do sometimes put, like I say, they're going to put the yellow or red lights in their home. At nighttime, it's best to have no lights at all. But if they don't have, say, on a DC power, you're going to have that flickering effect from the lights. And that too is going to stimulate a reaction within the body. So, you know, it seems counterintuitive, but it's only because in the West, there isn't this much ingrained studying of physics in school. So that's why typically we find people from Asia, Russia, you know, Eastern Europe, those guys understand it. They get it very quickly. They're able to process it because they base learning, teaching, and physics focused in this quantum biology aspect. Where in the West, it's kind of like, you know, let's focus more on biochemistry. And unfortunately, biochemistry doesn't tackle this issue. It's at the wrong scale. It only goes at the chemical process.
But I also think it's sort of like a public health level issue too. So most health information to the masses, to the 90% of the world or in the Western world, is going to be through public health distribution, you know, pamphlets, adverts, TVs, that kind of stuff. And light isn't you know, I don't hear light talked about publicly in a way like, oh no, you've got terrible fluorescent lights on. That's probably, not a great thing to have in your house. Or, that, do you think you're getting too much light when at night or something like that? It's, maybe in Asia or in Russia, those kind of places too, maybe some of their different societal philosophy and their healing modalities of treatment, that they take that into account, like the yin and the yang, the lights and the fire and the water. Maybe that's another element that makes
it just comes down to a dopamine issue. I mean, if your dopamine levels are low, you're not going to be able to correlate the whole aspect of light. So, I mean, even like I mentioned just now, China actually has one of the largest diabetic problems in the world now because of the whole excessive blue light issues and people moving into the cities and away from that process. So, with the whole culture thing, it's a thing of, you have to move away from trying to save the world. That's my understanding. If we work on evolution here, the ones that make adaptive change are going to flourish forward. And that's sort of what you do with your show. You focusing on how can I protect myself, number one, because, you having to deal with patients, you having to deal with the, normally shitty environment you used to work. And, you need to make sure that you're able to have a mental sanity so that, and health, so that you can influence your family by leading example. You're not coming home like a Nazi dictatorial person or dictator saying, listen, this is how it's going to work. You're explaining it and you're putting on the glasses because you're doing it and making a difference. And when you're in your practice and you're wearing glasses and you're seeing your patients or your consultant customers and they ask, why do you have them? And it becomes a conversation starter piece. And then you're able to influence them. Okay, this is what's happening. And just by putting the glasses on, we'll start to raise dopamine levels that much more. And by raising it, then they're able to go, okay, I'm feeling a bit better. I'm understanding there's more of a relationship. What's the next thing I can learn more? And then they end up, subscribing to your show and they're wanting to learn more and understand that process. But, for you just to say it's a public health thing, the public health thing comes in from other SuperDads out there that choose to take it to the regulatory body or to take it to court. I mean, I've been in court 4 times where I've demonstrated non-native EMFs cause a biological effect. So, it's only by taking those actions, by protecting, like even in school, having your child wearing blue locking glasses if they do have fluorescent lights. And if they make a statement, you as a citizen scientist, along with your listeners, they are unable to understand the science to explain the biology. So when they do confront those other low dopamine assholes out there who don't have the control, pretty much that's what it is. They're able then to sway them in an argument or discussion. And if it does go to court, then you will win with the judge. Because you're not going out of your way to change the system. You're going out of your way to improve the biological capacity of your children. You don't want them to get dumber with low dopamine. And all these things you can check with blood work. There's a lot of labs that can test and verify these things, but it's an expensive process. So that's why, that's why I enjoy the thing of quantum biology and biophysics is that, we're using physics to explain biology. And in physics, you're not able to disprove Einstein's E equals mc squared equation or many others. So, when you can use that evidence in court and you don't have to do a whole extra study because this physics explains this thing called universal law. So, with those kind of things, if a guy tells you talking BS, you just say, all right, show me how you can disprove Einstein's 1922 Nobel Prize.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be doing that.
So it's part of that process, and it is tricky. It is can be overwhelming for parents because, as you've experienced, when you're dealing with a person that is resistant to change, you don't have to. You're not going there to force them to change. But if it's going to inflict on yourself or your children, you're just going to give them the fingers and say, read between the lines. That's it, because you don't want to have your body abused by it.
Yeah. So when I was talking about the public health, it's one of those prong attacks again, just to improve the awareness factor. But word of mouth at the end of the day, and one-to-one chats like this or being around others is probably one of the most influential things. So an example of that would be if you were looking for a particular healthcare practitioner, you know, if you had a whole bunch of friends around, you go like, wow, you got to go see that person. You know, they know the stuff. They fix that problem. You'll just go to them. You know, you don't need just that social proof from others. That word of mouth will make you go, okay, I see this person at a different level now. And so I agree with you. You know, one of the best things that we can do too is once you have awareness of these different health issues and how you can mitigate them and how you can improve your mitochondria, like as simple as just trying to wear a pair of glasses, then it has an effect. And I used to do that when I was working in the clinic. I'd wear the glasses because unfortunately you have to have sometimes, you know, when you work in a commercial building and you can't change the lighting, it's just poor lighting. But
I'll
the one thing
disagree with you there, because you can change the lighting. You can get
if you pay for it.
Yeah, so what's the problem to pay for lights that give, you're still going to get a white light, but it's going to be balanced with infrared, UVA, and UVB.
So in this case, would you change the whole unit or would you change just the bulbs?
You can just change the bulbs. So, okay, if you have say fluorescent lights above you, you can change the, so for reptile animals, you have those combination bulbs that have the infrared, UVA, and UVB. So all you do is switch out for those bulbs. Because again, the issue with blue light is that you've got a blue light spectrum, but it's not balanced out with the infrared light. So when we're out in the sun every day, we have always 42% infrared light, and it balances out that blue light. Mm-hmm. So in an office environment, you don't have that. But if you switch out the lights, then that's going to change that supplementation process and interference. If you have windows, open the windows because that's going to let the sunlight in. So just having glass alone isn't good enough because it's going to block the light. You want to have that glass panel opened up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I was lucky enough in the clinic when I created my own sort of clinic on the third floor near Monte Cassino there, and I did get to choose some of the lights. I wasn't at that level yet where I understood all the different kinds of light bulbs, but I already knew I didn't want because it was a brand new building that the landlord had built, and I didn't want the normal strip bulbs that they put in. So I did change it up, and I used to even turn off the light and just have the natural light coming in because we had gigantic windows on the side of the building, at least to try and get natural light in. And I used to just do that myself because I found it would calm people down. So when you're trying to treat someone who's in a pain situation, light influences them too. You know, you could use the red light from a healing modality, but actually just putting them in sometimes in a darker room it's not dark, but it's just not so, you're not laying on your back looking at this horrible light.
Yeah. The UVA light causes that calming effect. So when you said you're exposing to sun, that actually combats the calcium efflux. It ends up being a calcium efflux blocker.
Okay. Yeah, I'm guessing you follow Jack Kruse.
He's one of the people, yeah.
Okay, because I mean, with the quantum biophysics roots, you've got to know your stuff, and it gets quite complex. So it's nice to hear you be able to explain it in a way, because sometimes I found when trying to understand some of the biophysics side of mitochondrial hacking, it can get so complex. Well, trying to listen it gets so complex, and you kind of think, so what do I actually do?
You don't need to understand it. You just need to be an observer. So the whole thing of citizen scientist, remember, your biggest crutch is knowledge. So what you've been taught in the past, or what you've been told by a certain, teacher or whatnot, and then you sort of take it as a belief system, that's going to be a crutch for you. But where a scientist, and when you look at all the old textbooks, from the 30s, 40s, and so forth, they were observers. So they'll do an experiment, they'll observe the effect. And again, all of it was done in natural light, good water chemistry, you had nature, you had this whole non-linear relationship. But when you started having studies going into this, what's called a controlled environment, a laboratory where you have very poor light, poor magnetic field, you have this dysfunction of things, it's no wonder that the results give you the wrong effect when you try them afterwards, or they give you inconclusive effects. So, it's shifting away from it. So, just by you, like you've been doing over the years, you tried one thing, you felt better. Okay, it's nice. I'm going to keep doing it. And then when you do go into the science part of it, remember, it's only going to be hard if your dopamine levels are low. So if you are finding that the science is too difficult, that means you need to address why dopamine levels are not high enough yet. And again, that's a non-linear relationship.
Yeah, I can guess in one way, but you also have to understand actual physics and terminology and definitions and certain by equations also. You need that education level.
No, I disagree, because, you know, if you want to go crazy, the thing is...
So James, are you telling me you can teach anyone and they'll understand this?
Well, that's the whole job of a consultant, is that you learn this stuff and you take persons from a low dopamine state who are in a panic and are fighting and whatnot, and you take them from demonstration. So, you know, I teach people either through the glasses, or I teach them through cold thermogenesis.
But those are so what they learn are the actionable points. They don't learn the calcium efflux and all that kind of stuff. They just understand, I need to walk on the beach barefoot. I need to swim in the sea. I need to wear these glasses.
They learn it
level.
through the process, and their dopamine levels start to increase. They then start to learn the process, because the brain is able to start picking up the pairs. So when they start to see the relationship, then I start throwing in, okay, this is what this means. It's the reaction to that. And they go, it makes sense. And when I see a person, I'll see them over months, because it takes time for them to evolve with the process. And then they'll start. And also, I mean, look, I mean, what's great in my age compared to, you know, when you were a student, you know, you just had papers for these things. But now you have all these old fogies that were the authors of these papers have put books together, and they put it in such an easy narrative aspect that by reading these books makes, you know, they explain the science and the words and terminology a lot easier. I mean, there's a whole thing of, you know, Gilbert Ling on water chemistry, and his stuff is like, whoa, you know, you really have to study quite heavy, like you said. But then you have guys like Gerald Pollack, who, you know, the fourth phase of water, how he put it together, you know, much more easily. Like even the salt book, you know, he took all these crazy papers on different disciplines, and he put them into one simple thing of, you have the idea of salt. We know what salt is, and then he links it onto the relationship. So the more you strive this connection understanding, then you go, okay, that's what it means. And even during the process, as your dopamine levels come up, you know, it's always encouraged to go back to what you listened to or read to before, because then you're going to pick up more of the relation and go, this is what it means. Like I said, the whole thing with iodine, we think, oh, James, I've got iodine salt. Is it not going to work? And they're saying it's a stepping stone, but it's not going to do the difference. And you say, oh, James, talking about, you know, DH3, which is found in omega-3s. You know, can't I then just take krill oil because it's supposed to be like the best thing? And I'd say, yes, but you're wasting your money and time. One is the DHA often gets destroyed during the shipping process. And two, and again, we're talking about Einstein's equation, the whole thing of photobiomodulation. You have to have that chemical in a certain process interacting with light for your body to process it. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So, I mean, that's where it becomes this thing of, okay, like you asked about public health, when people start to understand this relationship and protect themselves, then they start saying, okay, in order for me to survive or supplement more, I'm going to go out of my way to start or support an oyster farm, for example, or a fish farm, because, you know, I want to create this more protected space. The same with seaweed. Seaweed works, again, very well because it deals with the acidification issue within the body, and the same in the sea. From non-native EMFs, we have this higher accumulation of acidity in the ocean, and seaweed helps process it out. So by understanding how this is vital to our own survival and in improving our redox, we then understand, okay, we're going to put protection mechanisms in place for it to grow and mitigate against these effects. Because technology, it's not going to go away. We do need it. Unfortunately, technology at the moment is completely unregulated. So we have to put in these measures to regulate it differently and implement these mitigation options, and not just have them be a biohack, but a mito hack. Because again, it's not just, you know, putting the infrared sauna or sunbed in your practice. It's about how does the community work together of, hey, you know, it's not working out. They're going to pay their $5 a month or, you know, pounds a month or whatnot. And they come through every day on a cloudy day to get their pep up. And by that, they feel, okay, I feel better when I come and see Gary. You know, I don't know why. And then I'm going to ask him why. And then they'll start to understand the relationship. They can learn the science. But you don't need, I mean, my kids, right? My Lily is 2.5, River's 1.5. They understand the science very well, and I teach it to them, but they understand more because they get, Dad, I don't need this. It's good that you tell me about the terminology, but I understand, okay, this time of day, I need to go in the sun. This in the morning, I got to get that AM sunlight on my tummy. Otherwise, the bacteria is not going to grow. My kids love CT as well. I mean, they would go to the ocean with me. It's the best combat in winter against flu. But again, you can't be stupid. You have to get understanding. You have to see a person like yourself, a consultant, that's going to guide them through the process. Because, like I said, we all, even me, I've made F-ups in the past, and that's why my body failed again when I had a stroke for the second time in my life. And, thankfully it didn't kill me. And I had my kids and my wife, and I had enough motivation from and going, I'm not going to let this beat me. And I need to get up on my body as quickly as possible. Because, not being able to speak, or when your wife tells you you're writing or speaking, and she says, repeat it again because you're talking a different language, it's scary. And I know my kids at a young age, it's the most critical time. So, I mean, you're a very fortunate position because you being a medical trained practitioner, people come to you already with this initial trust in you. And you have the ability to guide them in this process of, to influence them better. But you being medically trained, I mean, similar to what would be called a surgeon, your definition is to teach. Your job and mandate is to teach people, to teach your patients, teach your clients. And the whole thing is like, again, the whole thing of a show being a super dad, by you first tuning the change in yourself, it's your mandate to teach your children in order how to survive in this newer environment. Because kids are going to be dumber. I mean, that's evident what's happening when we look at the studies and the effects from the environment. But if you don't change the environment, you're never going to get better. So the more you can, train your children as citizen scientists on the practice of things, understanding, why they do it, even the whole thing of photosynthesis, they are then going to be able to, go to college, go to university, and find this stuff very easy. They're not going to get as sick. They're going to have a stronger mitochondria, and not having a child not being infertile, or having a child with some mitochondrial disease. Because that's what we're seeing with the studies coming out now.
Yeah. And the inquisitive mind is something I think hopefully most parents might want to try to do in their children. And it's something that we definitely try to do with our kids, is to have that that search mindset, So I think of it where like I've been able to do the podcast and all the website stuff because I'm all self-taught. So, people used to ask me, okay, so who did your website or whatever? And it's like, no, I did it because I have that inquisitive mindset, and I actually just taught myself how to do that. And I think maybe, and hopefully what I'm trying to do as a dad is to inspire my children to go, you know what, at the end of the day, as long as you have that openness to learn, and that are, as you said, the why questions, and you do that, the world's your oyster. You can that's the better thing with the world nowadays. And in one way, what technology has, I think, has a benefit. So there's a lot of negatives to technology, but the one benefit is this, like even me and you being able to communicate like this now and to spread a message. So it's kind of like, so how do we harness the power of this communication and this ability to find data and to research and to culminate information quicker, but then we can use it to also make this technology safer, or our use of the technology safer too.
So, tell us, a bit sort of what your family or cultural practices with all these biohacks you've been doing over the years. So give us some words of wisdom if you don't mind sharing.
Well, probably the best thing I would say is just the technology thing at the moment, because that's what kids are growing up with too. And so I don't, with the router, it's away. I don't have the Wi-Fi on. We do have the Wi-Fi on I've got it on a time control. So it's just so my wife can access it at certain times. And then even there, if my daughter, because she's now just about to turn 7, she likes watching some YouTube videos about how to make things and how to do these things. And so we'll just have Wi-Fi on just because the iPad needs where she is at that time. But then even there, like I've got into trying to, I know it's maybe not always the best thing, but like trying to use EMF covers, like this one's called Safe Sleeve. So I've got it around my phone. I've got one for my laptop. I've got one for the iPad for my daughter. But there we also have limited time. So she's only allowed to use the device for X amount of time. She's not allowed to be on it all the time. And, don't hug the thing and don't have it right by your face. So little things like that I'm teaching her. We also have, I bought this device here so that we can actually just Ethernet the iPad at times 2, Ethernet the phones, even if we need to do something on the phone. I've got I've got my Ethernet plugged into the mains at the moment so that I can access the internet but not have Wi-Fi on. And also,
so how well does that Ethernet adapter cable work?
Oh, very well.
So it's not, one thing people always argue is that it's too much a hindrance because you have this cable coming out kind of thing, or...
No, I love it. And, I think if you look at the actual technology of the internet, Wi-Fi is a hindrance for speed. So if you want good, stable, fast internet, Wi-Fi is actually a problem. So that's why you don't have Wi-Fi servers. They have to be networked in by an actual cable for stability and for speed control. So if you want, so for me, that's why everything is actually wired into for stable internet, fast internet. So what I'm paying for, I'm actually going to be getting. But definitely for your devices, it's I don't find a hindrance at all.
Because those are quite inexpensive. I mean, how much? Well, you got the original Apple one. What's the price on that? Plus minus.
No, this one here, I got it off eBay. So talking about Apple, I bought a new laptop. So I've got this new fancy Apple laptop here, and I can see the way Apple is going is they are so Wi-Fi driven. Cables are confusing to them. Like even when I was speaking with a sales rep and going, no, I need an Ethernet cable. So with the new Apples with the USB-Cs, I can't take it out now, but my Ethernet cable can't plug straight into the laptop. I have to have a USB-C connector from that into the Ethernet. And when I first got the laptop, I'm like, okay, so you guys must have an adapter. And he was thinking, I don't know, do we? Like, why don't you just use Wi-Fi? Like, no, I don't want to use Wi-Fi. I want it to actually be plugged in. Okay, so it's like I had to find the corner of the Apple store, and there was just this, maybe just a couple of these things, and that was it. And it's like, am I such a random person not to want to have Ethernet, laptop? But no, so that's the Apple one. But otherwise, surprisingly, for the phone and for the iPad, you can't get an Ethernet version. So I couldn't find it, any official one. Yeah. But I just got this one, and it was cheap. Could have been somewhere around the £10 mark, I think, if I remember, off eBay. So I think that's a great investment.
Yeah, I'll get the show note link from you afterwards, just so I can put in the show notes for everyone so they can find it on eBay. Because I found in many cases cheaper and easier to buy from South Africa on eBay and have it shipped to you than trying to find a local supplier.
Yeah.
And also on eBay, it's also better tested and the guys get you the exact model, because with those LAN adapters, USB ones, you have different model ones. So sometimes you need to have an external power source, others aren't. And it's, depending on these different things. So at least on eBay, they disclaim, okay, it works with this software update or this model and those kind of issues. And I love it with the mobile device because, I mean, I do all my WhatsApping via the computer using WhatsApp Web. Mm-hmm. So, it's great. And that's the same for that aspect. So you just have it plugged in there, phone's on airplane mode, and you gunning away using your apps and still functionalities, texting and whatnot, all via your desktop or laptop computer. So it works quite well in an office space environment where you've got your computer here and your little mobile devices all attached around as peripheral screen devices.
Yeah. And even there, what I do with my phone, if someone has apps that particularly work better on their phone, for example, so I've got my phone here, but I actually just use the Apple cable so that it's a USB-C, and I just plug it straight in. And I've changed the settings on my laptop to actually be to transfer the internet from the LAN into the phone. So I can use my laptop with the internet, plus I can actually use my phone if it's connected to the cable, which is connected to the laptop. So my phone is on airplane mode, but it will connect through the cable to the internet. So that was another thing I just did. So, because my family, they know they can't call me on the phone because it's on airplane mode all the time. I hate it. It's in a way, I flick it off, you know, when I'm traveling, maybe if I need to just connect or make a call or something. And even there, of course, I don't ever put the phone next to my head. You know, I make sure I've got like these headphones or something, so so I've got that distance parameter, or I use speakerphone. I just don't want the thing next to my head either. But I guess in one way I'm teaching my kids that too, because they can see that. So my habits, they can see, oh yeah, dad, we talk about the Wi-Fi not being on, and they see how I've connected everything. So so maybe hopefully I'm trying to help my kids as they're growing up in this more technology world, which, you know, there's just people. That's another thing. Yeah, people just think, oh, let's just have more, and sometimes all these more devices that are coming up, they also automatically put Bluetooth on or Wi-Fi on or something, and it's kind of like, no, I don't want that. So even like when I got this wearable, you know, this Aura ring, I've never worn a wearable in my life or any tech like that, but it's the only reason one of the biggest reasons I got it is because I can put it on airplane mode. So it's like, okay, at least there I can sort of play with this tech. But I'm glad that there's a brand that is actually thinking of, okay, we need to give the consumer the control to say, no, stop. Like, I want it on air. I don't want it transmitting, you know, Bluetooth or Wi-Fi and all this stuff. Whereas, yeah, I guess it comes back to the Apple Store kind of scenario. Like, why wouldn't you want to use Wi-Fi? Why don't you, you know, I see people with their laptops on, and Apple also do that. They automatically put your Bluetooth on. It's like, as soon as I got the laptop, no, turn it off. I don't want Bluetooth on or around me all the time. And no, the Wi-Fi's off, you know. But unfortunately, I'm just thinking of all the poor people who go buy this nice tech, and it's like, boom, the tech is just booming them, you know, with especially Bluetooth.
You have to understand, like what I brought on earlier, is that all this tech lowers the dopamine levels. And actually, that's why ICD-11 code has this now code for gaming addiction, is that it increases opiate addictions. So, you know, part of the whole strategy of protecting your kids is you don't want to have a kid with an opiate addiction issue, because dealing with a brat of hell that literally cannot understand or comprehend things, because they're in this addictive state, you know, you want to avoid and mitigate that as much as possible. You know, so it's in your best interest as a parent to not be, you know, going after the bottle every few hours to try and get your kids not in this addictive state.
Yeah, and I think if anyone wants a really good example of that, on YouTube, I was watching some documentaries on internet addiction, and just how severe it is, particularly in Asia, in China, you know, with the gaming community there. And they have to lock these kids away, and, you know, they go through massive detox issues and psychological troubles, and what it does to the family. And yeah, I'm glad there's an ICD-10 code for that.
Well, the quickest thing with those issues is actually it works very well for heroin addicts, is just putting them in the sun. That's the best and quickest protocol. So that's why they have these detox camps where they put them out in a camping nature thing, except those persons still tend to stay in a cabin most of the time, and they're not putting them in the sun. So again, you know, putting them in the sun creates the chemical change reaction and controls the stuff to get them out of it. But then they go back to the environment. So, you know, even when I've been doing you know, basic experiments with persons that have this addiction issue, just by changing the blue light element and the non-native nnEMF environment. So if they're playing, you know, PlayStation thing, you know, having it cabled, or, you know, having the different lights changed, their addiction problem isn't aggressive like it was before. They're able to actually put it down and go, you know what, I'm over it. I'm going to go outside and do something else instead. You know, I've had some guys join with the CT. These guys are like 22, 24. One of them extreme PTSD, tried to kill himself a few times. Other guy, you know, heavy tech, playing all the time. And, you know, I took them for the CT session the first time. They go, you know, it's cold, but I'll think about doing it again. And they call me the next day like, no, listen, I want to come in the morning again. And their main practice now is about actually getting away from their house and not sleeping in and not playing games. And they want to come and be in the ocean in the sun. And that's their thing. So, and then they slowly start to incorporate the changes in their space, and they're not playing the game addictions like they used to. They're not going for Counter-Strike tournaments and not doing these things, because we're changing a different addiction of increasing the dopamine levels. So again, we're not going into the science, we're just going into the experiences of it and that cultural trying it. And then that they find as a different supplementation to the addiction.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, sorry.
No, I was going to say, and especially what you're doing there too, I find is just that it comes back to that circadian biology stuff again, where you're getting them up in the morning. So they're actually waking up. They're trying to get the morning lights, so whereas before they would have slept until 10 or 11 sometimes because they've been up till 3 in the morning gaming. So it's giving them a good habit and giving them that natural sunlight and resetting their circadian, their body clock.
So, I mean, with the obviously mobile peripheral devices, I mean, do you have external screen filters on them, or did you just change the software app on there to change the lighting?
I just use software. So I think I saw on your website, you also promote the Iris software.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I use Iris. I used Flux originally, but then after I interviewed Daniel, then I thought, no, I like this Iris. I tried it out and I just love the ability of all the different settings you can do. So no, I use Iris, but when it comes, unfortunately, that's the problem with Apple, is that you can't use Iris on your iPhone and you can't use Iris on an iPad. So in that case, there you have to get a bit hacky techy, where you can use the night shift mode, but then also just the brightness levels too. I find is to just make sure that you drop the brightness levels, that you don't have this light, super bright light bulb in front of your eyes at night. That makes a big difference. Yeah, I used to do that even with patients, is just to show them, like, okay, if you want, because they want to still know how to use the tech, but I could actually just pick up their phone and show them, let's drop the light, or let's pop it on to night shift mode. Oh, that's really cool. And it's like, yeah, just try that for a little while. Or if you were lucky enough and you had, say, an Android, then in that case, that we could actually install one of these red light filter programs on there, an app, because Android allows you to do that. And that was a good teaching tool.
Yeah, I mean, with the Apple, with the whole, I found the night shift mode was similar to Flux when it, that's where Night Shift built its platform from the whole Flux model. But
yeah, they just copied.
Yeah, but the problem with Flux is that the default setting, like say with an app, it's more of a marketing aspect and actually does jack all shit effect. I find in Flux, you have to really customize it to go right down to the settings of that red light spectrum. And that's what Daniel's done with Iris, is that you have these profiles that automatically can do it for you more easily and effectively. Plus, he addresses the whole flicker effect more adaptively. Where with Apple, I found the best thing is to put the screen filter on top. Alternatively, the night shift mode, you have to actually go into the accessibility function, like for disabled persons. And then there you would change the color spectrum and intensity to be more of a red spectrum and changing that color aspect.
Yeah, and you can, and with that function, then you can, I think it's a double tap on the home button, and it will change it into that aspect for you, which is really cool.
Yeah, well, ideally you want to have it 24/7. You don't actually want to have it in the blue light mode. That again comes down to the whole thing, like I mentioned earlier, where your infrared or your blue light needs to be balanced out with red light. So, I mean, just having that filter effect is like going from, unfiltered cigarettes to filtered cigarettes. It's still crap, but it is a bit better. Because remember, your latitude, when it's the blue light mode with the light, you're looking at about just under 6 times more light coming from a mobile device than you have from the sun outside. So, I mean,
it's a lot more.
It's going to definitely F up the circadian rhythm quite a lot. But yeah, tell us also more about your other things you implement with yourself and your family. So we've covered the wireless and the lanyards. We've covered the blue light. You've got the glasses. Which brand are you wearing, darling, on the red carpet? What brand do you have today?
This brand is called Duco. The reason I like these guys, they're just more for a daytime kind of use. It's a light yellow, but I've got a slightly bigger head, and I find with glasses it can push into my head and irritate behind the back of my ears a bit. And these, the frames are really bendy. I love these frames. I wish more kind of glass companies would use these frames. They're much softer on my head. So Duco, but otherwise at night, I currently have the Swannies for the darker ones that I use in the evening. Yeah, and that we've got the kids. Well, my daughter wears them sometimes too. Well, she always sees Dad wearing them particularly. So that's another thing that she's learning, and my son's learning. diet wise, yeah, we talk about different nutritional elements of food and sourcing. I think the one thing I really enjoyed when I did that whole experiment back in 2012 was just looking at the quality of food from a food source point of view and just educating myself. So we were talking about Irene Farm, but there was another farm called Mooberry. I think hopefully they're still going. They were a great couple. And I think they were out near North Riding in Johannesburg. And so, yeah, we actually went out to the farm. We did the thing. We went to the farm. We spoke to the farmer. We saw the cows, the Jersey cows, the Guernsey cows. We talked about the difference between the types of cows. We brought up the discussion of A2 milk. That was quite nice just to hear. Okay, so as a farmer, like, what's it really like to be a farmer? What are the difficulties you have to go through to make quality food? So that was, from a dairy perspective. But then even they're going, okay, so once you start that, then you ask them, hey, do you know any farmers who actually do it for beef or for, meat for consumption? And then you ask them about how they rear it and where can you buy it? And then sort of looking, okay, you can buy it, but is it just not economically feasible sometimes too, depending on your budgets? So I always like to look at that from another thing was someone to go, okay, it's coming back to that. If you had all the money in the world and all the gadget stuff, this is what you could do. But a lot of people, they've only got so much money. So where do you spend your money to get your biggest bang for your buck and your return of investment when it comes to your food sourcing? So we have those discussions around the table. So my kids are hearing that. They see the foods we buy. I think we're pretty lucky too, because, I guess most parents would look at what my daughter eats and goes, she's able to eat. She asks for kidneys and livers and all these organ meats. She loves the stuff. Yeah, I'm personally not so much of a kidney fan, but yeah, my wife will make stuffed hearts. It's a great meat too. So they're learning and interacting with food in a different way too. So we're not sort of. That's another thing I do see, particularly here in around the UK region. You've got those TV programs of kids who put like a vegetable on their tongue and they vomit, or they gag, and there's a sort of a different psychological element they have with food for whatever reason. And yeah, thankfully my kids aren't growing up with that element, so that's something else we're dealing with.
Well, the vegetable reaction is actually perfectly normal.
To be gagging
on vegetables. The thing is, remember the way the brain is, our brain when we're born is different in terms of how it's myelated compared to animals. So, kids crave those fats and those proteins for it. So with your kids, it's different because they've naturally been growing up and supplementing with those fats and proteins. So they want to, in order to help, develop the brain a lot better. The thing with vegetables comes in later, where it comes to the exposure to the sun and getting a different effect. But with kids naturally avoiding vegetables, that's normal. But once they have that aspect of the fats, then that's the most important thing, and actually developing the brain.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and I'm hoping we've done the right thing. But yeah, my kids have had lots of healthy fats since they were born. So,
well, it's what they naturally crave. Remember, a child's brain, because again, they can't even crawl, where animals that come out the womb, they're crawling and moving. So that's why their brains are differently myelated, where ours is designed on purpose not to have that same process. So a child till the age 25, they're gunning to have their brain develop as quickly as possible. And they're going to go after those fats and oils to get that process to going as quickly as possible, so they can build those synapses and those aspects. So yeah, what you're doing is perfectly, again, like I said, you want to focus more on nature and observation versus this knowledge thing of what a book says. I mean, we've got thousands of books coming out all the time, cookbooks and diet books, and they mean, if they were working, I'm sure that there would only be one book kind of thing. But because, guys are missing the plot here, it's not really working out. So that's part of the aspect. I mean, yeah. Sorry, carry on.
No, so I was saying, another thing that we looked at there even was, when we had our first daughter, we were researching just the birthing process, and trying to make that as non-traumatic both for the child and for the mother at the same time. So just that element. And we had we had an amazing birthing team. So we were lucky enough at that time in Saxonwold in Johannesburg. There was a clinic started up called Genesis Clinic,
Yes.
and they're a natural birthing clinic. And we were so lucky that they had just started up. They'd just been going for a little while, and we got a good referral to an excellent midwife who unfortunately isn't with us in this world anymore, and a doula, her partner. And just that birthing team, from a psychological point of view, educating both me and my wife to be ready for that first big event was something I'm so privileged that we had an opportunity to do too. And we had a natural water birth, no complications, no issues. It was an amazing experience for us. So that was another element that we tried to hack in a way, but it's more just I use the word hack, but it's just going back to nature. It's just what naturally should happen. Now, you mentioned earlier about C-sections too. I used to, especially being in Johannesburg, near Sandton and Fourways in that very affluent area. I used to joke about the question, I wonder what's genetically gone wrong with mothers, why there's a 90% cesarean section rate in this section, It's like they've all got pelvises that are too small or whatever else. It's like, when did that suddenly happen within the last 10 years? Unfortunately, I do know that there are medical reasons, economical reasons why the C-section is so much higher anyway. But we were a small minority amongst our friends to have a natural birth in that way. And we actually started a trend, so friends after us even went, okay, you guys had such an amazing experience. And because they came to see us at Genesis, and it was like a luxury 5-star hotel in that place. And I'm still blown away. So for anyone listening, you've got medical insurance in South Africa, so medical aid, and the medical aid covered everything of our Genesis experience. And I think it came out to like 3,000 Rand or something. It was ridiculous how cheap it was. And I'm pretty sure it was 3,000. It was something so small compared to, going to a hospital stay. But so that was another way that we influenced people to go like, wow, that's actually really such a beautiful experience that you had there. So my wife, we've been doing, breastfeeding since day one. We've no latching issues, no problems with that. So you've got the breastfeeding benefits for bringing up your kids from a nutritional point of view, but also the sensory point of view with the latching, the growth with the mouth, the facial muscles, all the benefits that come with that kind of stuff. So we've been privileged enough to be able to do that for both of our kids too. Just trying to think.
But that's quite a key thing that you got to do as a super dad, is actually being part of that birthing process. Because a lot of the practice South Africa found is dads must just be the sperm donor and the woman the incubator, and the guy must just pedal off and not even be a part of the birthing process. It's just the woman alone. And even the thing is, I found you would have the practice where women would get defensive. They would want to complain of, oh, the man's not there. And then when he wants to be there, they're like, no, get away. This must be my drama story. I want to have a story type of thing of poor me, get attention again. This dopamine filling attention psychology aspect. But it's great that, you as a father, in a way, you fought to be part of the process. You were there as, I'm not just going to be the credit card paying for it. I'm going to be involved. I'm going to learn. I'm going to interact with these people. I'm going to be, proactive. I want to make sure this is going to how it's going to be. So you took on that super dad ethos of, I'm going to create a protective environment for my wife and my children, and look at what's going to be going long-term for the future here.
Mm-hmm. And even there, it was interesting going through that birthing process with addressing the psychological element as a father, so if you've never been to a birth, of course, which I think 99% or 99% of all dads would have never been to a birth, it's just, it's a complete unknown, and your natural instinct is to protect. And in a way, it's so interesting to be in that environment where you want to control or protect certain things, but you've also you need to then outsource your trust to the midwife and go, I trust your experience. Like, you've done this so many times, like you actually guide me, but at least I'm here, to also have that experience. And it was, I'm so glad I was able to do that. But another good thing there was dealing with the psychological element to it. So a good tip I would give to everyone, and that I always suggest to parents to be, is, what did our doula call it? She called it dealing with your tigers. or tiger safari. That was it, Rosalia. So she would take you on a tiger safari. So that was our antenatal class. It's not, hey, this is how you breastfeed, this is how you change the nappy, blah blah blah. That stuff you're going to learn anyway afterwards. It's, you know, don't try pre-learn that stuff. You can go to Baby Expos if you want to learn how to put a nappy on. But the biggest bang for your buck is dealing with those tiger safaris. So in that case there, it was, especially because we were hoping our plan A was going to be a natural birth. But dealing with a tiger safari, Rosalia, the doula, would go, okay, but just imagine now we get to a situation where the midwife goes, look, there's a complication. You can't have a natural birth. We actually have to call in the gynae and we have to proceed to plan B, which is the cesarean section. And so I loved it that she actually made you go through that mental exercise to go, okay, imagine now we're in this room, it's low lighting, it's hot, there's been a whole bunch of activity, but now we, you know, the midwife has just told you we need to call the gynae. And, you know, but actually you have to visualize that. Now imagine your wife's on the gurney, she's going down the passageway and the lights are flickering above her. You're suddenly in the surgical room, drapes get pulled down, there's all these smells, these noises, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You're getting gowned up. And I found that really useful to sort of prepare yourself so that you hopefully have the best birthing event that you could, but you're also prepared that it's not devastating if you can't have it. You know, nothing's perfect in life too. So that would be my top tip if anyone ever wanted to, is actually try deal with those tiger safaris. And I would even say in the reverse, a lot of people go for the cesareans, but then I would see mothers who were depressed after choosing a cesarean. They were just gunning for it, and they always go, I wonder if I could have had the natural. And, you know, and then I feel so sorry for them that they have this sort of mild psychological issue that no one ever addresses after the birth of, okay, let's just debrief you, and it's okay. This is why you chose to not have the cesarean, and, you know, not to have a natural and whatever else. So,
well, it's crap because they can't walk for a day, you know, because their legs are paralyzed. They can't go to the bathroom. They can't properly hold a child on a tummy like they want to, and they're immobilized for the next 1 to 2 weeks. So
yeah,
it's going to be depressing.
Yeah, and the first person to touch your, you know, to sometimes touch your child is gloves and latex gloves, and they get pulled away, and all the other factors, you know, maybe don't get put on the breast, and yeah, and even there, sometimes people think a cesarean is super safe, which it's very good, but there's also, I mean, I remember one particular patient, she died from it. You know, we lost a patient, just thinking, oh, where's Doodah? No, unfortunately, you know, she had complications from cesarean. She's no longer with us. Like, and I felt so sad. Like, I mean, like anything, you do get deaths in natural birth too, but yeah, that was one way. That was another way with our particular family that we went, okay, let's see, how can we try have even the best birth we can have, and we were lucky enough to have 2.
I also think what's not communicated enough or practiced is people always tend to focus a lot on the mother, and yes, it's a you know, a challenging process, but us men also go through a very high stress of it because we put in a place where we're emasculated, we don't have control like we normally want to do. You know, we also put in the stress of what's going to happen, what could go wrong, we're caring for our loved one. And, you know, I feel guys should also be taken care of more. So like the mother would get pampered, I think as guys should also get pampered. Why shouldn't we go, like, say, for the massage or the mani or pedi, or, you know, this kind of social chat thing? And, you know, even the whole thing of a baby shower, this tradition where it's only for, you know, only women involved. I think that's total crap. I started this thing I'm doing actually for my brother-in-law this weekend. He's having his firstborn, and we are doing a man shower. We were going to trampoline world, and, you know, we were trampolining in the pizzas and then the ocean and the whole thing, you know, and they want to dress him up in a diaper and having fun with it. And, you know, it creates more of that camaraderie, and there's a sharing of stories, and there's guys coming who don't have kids. And again, you're having this social practice of saying, hey, this is what happens, or this is what's going to be done, and, you know, don't worry about it. So you kind of taking the thing of, and guys in the way can tend to be more practical. Women want to make this sometimes this long story emotion. We just say, you know what, this can be terrible, but you can do this, and, you know, chat to this guy, or, you know, see this person, or watch out for the medical aid trying to do this to you, and this is what you should do. It's how you negotiate with your card payments, or don't buy this, buy that instead, kind of thing. So creating more this cultural of this dad network of doing these cultural activities of supporting and going for these sort of pamper sessions, because, you know, the hard thing I found is, after the birthing process, I just wanted to collapse and sleep afterwards. My brain isn't developing the hormones like my wife is, where the brain structure is changing and can handle these things. With all that stress, you just want to go and sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And to have that understanding that, the man needs these kind of things.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about there is the concept of what we mentioned earlier about that social aspect, and that just the way that the world is developed now, that we don't get exposed to a lot of natural events in life anymore, like births and even deaths sometimes, So I know personally, even from that point of view, when it comes to death, I hadn't experienced anyone close to me dying until I was in my 30s, which is really late sometimes. So yeah, we recently had one of the great grandmothers pass away, and so my daughter already has got to see, okay, this is what happens at a funeral, and this is the grieving process. You're going to see adults crying and what's happening, and you're talking through that stuff too. So and when you're talking about there with the dads getting together, yeah, it's another way for dads who haven't had kids just to share experiences in a way. Yeah, you can sit around a braai, and have a chat and whatever, but maybe sometimes there when you're at a braai, you don't truly reveal yourself sometimes. I don't know, but yeah,
it's on a hike or something, or a fishing trip, or a guy sort of more, and it has to be an active environment and active doing stuff, because that's how we we nurture each other by hunting together, this pack movement thing. We have to have that pack activity.
Yeah, so instead of us putting our skins on and getting our spears out and and go running around, we instead all get together, put a costume on and jump on a trampoline or something. It's a new age way that men get together, and it's not a bad thing. It's another element to health, I believe, that we should be doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of enjoy the trampoline thing, because I mean, a lot of the guys that do the biohacking with the CT, we know they have the chest freezers or their own home pools. They buy a small trampoline and they actually jump on that for 2 minutes before jumping in the cold. I mean, even like our famous Tony Robbins, he does that before going into his CT pool.
And another element, other than the physics side of what the trampolining does, I've always said to people, the problem with adults is we lose our inner child. So this is coming maybe more my psychological bias of things, but I just found, you've got to tap into your inner child. Go have fun, go let loose, and it's in a safe way. And in that way, as a chiropractor too, people are being active, they're mobilizing joints, they're exploring motion other than the typical up, down, walk, backwards, turn, turn, turn. You've got to have this randomness in life. You've got to expect the unexpected in a way, like the black swan events. And yeah, so in that case, trampolining is fantastic because you're all over the place and you're learning how to control and your proprioception. And that's another element, as I also like to look at, is like what I do now in my 20s or as a teenager, I should also hopefully be able to do if I'm in my 80s, because that's it's sustainable and it's good for you.
I mean, coming to, like you mentioned, the physics thing. I mean, I think you did a show before on box breathing.
I haven't got into the breathing yet, no.
So with box breathing, a lot of it deals with the diaphragm, exercising that and getting the oxygen up. So the whole thing of trampolining, it's similar to hypobaric breathing, or the deep sea divers breathing, that whole process. And you actually, when you're jumping, you train the muscles to actually get a much higher VO2 content and a better control on CO2 adaptability or resistance. So that kind of like you say, you're feeling like a child. You're doing it because you actually are getting high on your own supply. And that's probably a stimulating reason why you want to do it again and again and keep on going. So that, it's part of that, that natural euphoria. You feel, I feel great. So again, it's, again, we're focusing on what can we do to our chemistry to get us this great psychological performance.
And that sort of goes into the flow state stuff, like go to a park and jump on a swing. That's you sort of naturally see it, I think, when you go to a park with a whole bunch of parents with young kids, and you try to get a couple of the parents who sneak onto the swing because they want to have a good swing themselves. And yeah, it makes you feel so good, I love that word lekker. It really does. It just gets you into that good state where you're just swinging away. And that's what, the guys, when they talk about flow state is, and it's kind of like, it's go on a roundabout, go on a swing, go something, move around, puts you in a different place. And it's another element to health that's so easy to do and sustainable, and you can do anywhere in the world.
But a key thing also with that, like you mentioned, flow, and I'm trying to remember the author's name from one of the original books. But the thing with flow is that, again, the reason why I said jump on the swing or whatnot is that he is wanting the parents to actually get grounded and getting the electrons through the metal. So typically what happens with those parents, they're wearing sneakers and not barefoot. So a child would be barefoot. There's always going to be the benefit, and then the sun taking their shirt off. But with adults, because of the social constriction, we covered up and wearing these sneakers that's blocking our ability to connect it. So by getting on the swing, because it's a metal chain connected to a metal frame in the ground, they're getting that grounding effect from it. So that's part of that, again, that physiology of getting back into those covalent bonds or mitochondria getting back into function. And you're active and you're getting more and more oxygen. So again, the person's getting naturally high in their own supply and increasing their dopamine levels. And they just want to stay on there for longer and longer and remembering, this again, what it's said about connecting the dots. If you can increase a person's dopamine levels, they're able to connect the dots of observation, go, this is how I felt when I was a child. This is what I feel like this. So they're able to go into a more of a lateral thought process versus this narrow, restricted aspect on a low dopamine state.
Mm-hmm. So when I install swing in my garden, I'm going to call it the earthing unit.
Yeah, provided it's a metal swing and not a plastic swing.
Yeah, no, I'll make sure if I get and wood doesn't help you at all because wood doesn't let you ground.
Yeah, wood doesn't. But again, like I said, if you're gonna have a wooden seat or using a tire, and then you're gonna use metal chains, that will work. But if you're touching a tree, for example, that is gonna ground you. So climbing a tree is actually an excellent exercise, and you're gonna get grounded from climbing a tree. But if you're just having a wooden piece with rope to it, you're not going to get that grounding effect.
Well, you're talking about grounding, and my daughter actually tells me, Dad, you need to go outside to do some grounding. So she already understands the concept of why it's good to go barefoot and touch the grass and go on the beach sand and go into the sea, because you need to do a bit of grounding every day. Yeah,
I mean, even my service dog does that for me. She picks up too much of change in me, and if I'm working, I want to try push myself. Even though I've got the grounding mat to the computer, but it's still not enough. She would purposely go and do something naughty, like grab a toy and try or bark, just to get me outside to chase her, because I'm like irritated. And then I start to calm down. I'm getting the sun, I remember, and she's calm, she's great, she's chilled. So she picks up that natural reaction. But most people normally would think the dog's just being a naughty little, just why I couldn't do something. But yeah, so she naturally has learned that process to pick that up and help me with that. But
and and the grounding just takes you outside, away from your tech and your devices for a while too, which is another benefit other than the physical grounding. It actually just gets you away from tech for a while, puts you in a different mindset, gets you outside, gives you the sun. Because you stand up, you suddenly realize, I need to drink some water or something. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of good stuff.
Oh, it's great. But I mean, also another key thing, like before we wrap up here, is the most challenging thing in these aspects is the partner in the relationship. So how, who changed first? Was it your wife or you? And then trying to get the other one to sort of get on board with it. And I assume you and your wife don't always get on board with stuff. My wife would often complain, saying, "Flippin', don't turn our place into an alien spaceship."
Yeah, well, it was me with both me and my wife have, had inquisitive minds and experimented with different things over the years. It's just the way we both like to practice. She's also a chiropractor. But it was me first with the whole butter coffee, bulletproof coffee thing back in 2012. But then she also entered the world, following all these different people online. She has a special interest more in gut biome and microbiome and fermentable foods. She loves like the Weston A. Price kind of stuff, which I do too, but she's really gone down a lot more with kind of fermentable foods and gut biome. And I think Natasha McBride Campbell, the neurologist, and those kind of things. Yeah, so in one essence, I'm not too clued up on all that kind of stuff, but she talks to me about it, and then I'll talk to her about other things like this, like we've been talking about too. So we've got a good mix, and together, hopefully, we're just we're exposing our kids to lots of ideas again, and whichever way they want to go in life, that's all I can do at the end of the day. I can just expose them and say, this is how I wanted to lead my life. And hopefully I've given you the best environment that you can grow up to, that you've had a lot of fun growing up, so that when you do leave home, that you feel confident, you feel self-independent, and you can go educate yourself in whatever way you want and go do whatever you want in the world. And that's the best I can do as a parent.
I think I should actually have your wife on the show too, because I mean, the whole gut biome thing, what we found, and even through my personal experience, is by changing the environmental factors has a much faster and more powerful reactive effect on the gut bacteria. There was a recent paper by Jeff Lech where he studied the Hasda and the Masai, where, based on the exposure with the sun and the grounding and that, actually they put heavy antibiotics in them and other type of toxicants, and the stuff had no effect on their gut flora bacteria. So I mean, that's the whole thing with CT. It changes the gut flora in the tummy. By you having that sun exposure in the morning changes that as well. And with that, it has a much more quicker reaction than having this whole fermented foods. So again, like I said earlier, the whole redox thing, if you deal the redox, having the fermented food afterwards is going to be quicker. But again, there's sort of an issue with some issues with the fermented foods because of the deuterium levels in them. And, so if you're not getting that morning sun to help process it, then what happens is you have an excess accumulation of it, and the person actually ends up having a slower redox as a result of it.
And the next thing we're really going down, and I'm starting to research more, is just fasting too. So that's a whole other element, I believe, that helps your gut as too. It's just that not always trying to eat food. And what does fasting do from a gut biome point of view? Yeah,
I mean, intermittent fasting, again, a lot of it, it shortens the recipe to proteins, but it gives your liver the ability to release the bile and mechanics of it, so that because when your body is flushing mitochondria every day or producing more, it's actually remove that whole gut lining like you're learning. And if your liver is not having the chance to enable this process, then you're not going to have that natural recycling of apoptosis and autophagy within the cells. So that's why intermittent fasting helps that process greatly.
Yeah, so that's definitely something I'm going to be trying to speak to more people about, is just different forms of fasting too, and just the pros and cons of each type.
Yeah, well, I mean, I look forward to subscribing and hearing those on your show. For our guests there, we're definitely going to have your site up there and giving them more details about them, getting some of the links from you for the eBay adapter and the glasses and all those things mentioned in the show. And yeah, if you have any concluding words, any final messages?
Well, I think I've been educated quite a bit by yourself today, James. Like I said, I use the word biohacking, and it's very colloquial. I'm not like grindware, wetware, because that's more the other side of biohacking, where people are doing implantables and trying to alter their DNA or their gut biome and stuff. I'm not that kind of person. I am more the N=1 self-optimization kind of person, where the best you can do at the end of the day is try and make the best person you can be. Because if you're healthier, you're more energetic, then hopefully you can take care not only of yourself, but then you have the energy to take care of others around you. And then hopefully they get enough energy to take care of themselves. And then it becomes a better social environment for everybody. So yeah, I've really enjoyed the interview today. I learned a lot, but hopefully I've been able to give some food for thought for some other things that people could consider.
Oh, definitely. I'm sure that you're going to get some good interest onto your site and because you have some very amazing guests on your show. I mean, I look at them, I'm going, wow, how the heck did he get those people? I mean, your research has been unbelievable. The way you interact with them and get them to narrate and expose so much information it's invaluable. It's really great. And thank you for being a super dad on the show.
Well, thank you.
For more, visit www.nicheradio.co.za.